And even though Roland was a little nervous about monsters and sad about his mom getting kidnapped, he was also excited because he was about to go on his first adventure. After I wrote the first chapter of my book, I showed it to my mom, who said she was proud of me for using my imagination. Then she said she couldn't wait to find out what happens next. I haven't shown it to my dad yet, because I want to finish it first. And when I'm done, I'm going to ask him to read it to me as my bedtime story. But I'll pretend I don't know what's going to happen, so it'll still be special. I was pretty excited to show the book to my best friend, Greg Heffley, because he likes stories with dragons and wizards and that kind of stuff, and I figured he'd think it was pretty awesome. But I couldn't really tell if he liked it or not, because at first he only said, I asked Greg what he thought of the story so far, and he asked me if I wanted his honest opinion, or if he should tell me what I wanted to hear. And I said I wanted his honest opinion. But Greg reminded me that the last time I asked for his honest opinion, it got him in trouble. That was the time I showed him my tap dancing routine after taking my first lesson. Greg told me he thought it was terrible, and that hurt my feelings. So I told his mom what he said, and she wasn't happy. Greg said if he told me his honest opinion about my book, and it hurt my feelings, I wasn't allowed to go running to his mom. So I said okay, and we did a pinky swear. After that was settled, Greg told me all the things that were wrong with my story. And boy, he had a lot to say. The first thing he said is that I can't start the book with "Once Upon a Time," because that's corny and it makes it sound like a fairy tale. And that kind of hurt my feelings right away, because it's supposed to be a fairy tale. Then Greg said no offense, but this Roland character has got a lot of problems, and the biggest one is his hair. He said Roland has a mullet, which is the worst type of haircut a person can have. I said the reason Roland's hair is long in the back is so he'll look cool when he does action stuff. And Greg said maybe Roland can get a haircut at the beginning of Chapter 2. Then Greg said no offense, but Roland kind of seems like a baby, and it's not really believable that a kid his age would sleep in his parents' bed. And that made me feel a little ashamed, because sometimes I sleep in my parents' bed, especially on nights when there's a really bad thunderstorm. Greg taught me a long time ago that if you say, no offense, then the other person isn't allowed to have hurt feelings about what you say after it. But I think that only works with kids, because one time I told my dad, no offense, but your breath stinks. And he got mad. Greg said the book was going to be too boring if it was only about Roland, and that he needed a sidekick. I said maybe Roland could have a best friend who goes with him, and his name could be Greg Heffley. But he told me everything about his life is copyright Greg Heffley, and if I used his name I'd have to pay him money. So I decided to make up a different sidekick for Roland, because I don't want any trouble with Greg. Greg said he didn't know if he could read a book about a boy who has to rescue his mom, because that's a little too weird. So I said maybe I could switch out Roland's mom for a princess, and Roland could rescue her instead. But Greg said nowadays princesses are tough and know how to fight, so they don't need some guy to rescue them. He said if I wrote a book about a helpless princess who needs to be saved by some dude, then I'm going to get a ton of angry letters. Well, that got me kind of worried, because I don't want to get a bunch of angry letters. But Greg said I could put my publisher's address on the back of the book, and then all the angry letters would go to them. I said I was just writing the book for myself, and that I wasn't really trying to get it published. But Greg said if I was going to do all this work, I might as well try to cash in. He said that if my book gets published, I'll have to think about movies and toys and t-shirts and swimwear and all sorts of other stuff too. And that sounded complicated. Then Greg said he'd make me a deal. He said I could focus on the writing, and he'd handle everything else. Then we'd split all the profits 50-50. I was excited, because that meant me and Greg were going to be partners. So we did another pinky swear to make it official. Chapter 2. Even though Roland felt pretty brave wearing Bampy's armor, he was still kind of scared to leave his village.